going to welcome everyone to Book Carnival. My name's Anne, and Book Carnival is in Orange, California. And we're delighted tonight to have Sheila Lowe with us. She's going to talk about her latest book and the adventures she's putting Claudia Rose through in Dead Letters. And then she has a PowerPoint presentation about Clark Rockefeller. And if you don't know who that is, she will be able to tell you all about it, right?
I think so, yes.
All right, Sheila, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you so very much. I always love coming to your store, so this is the next best thing.
Yes.
And I'm in Ventura, which is 100 miles north, so that's a little easier. Though I will,
Yes.
like I said, I'll be coming to Orange County on Friday. But good to see everybody. Thanks for being here. Uh, and as far as my book, well, I was going to ask for a show of hands, but not all of you have your screens on, so that doesn't work. But I was going to ask who is familiar with my series. Has anybody read any of those besides Anne? Oh, thank you, Nancy. Um, okay, because it just gives me an idea of, where to go with this. But assuming that the rest of you haven't, let me just tell you that the series, I started writing about Claudia Rose in 1997, but it wasn't until 10 years later that the first book got into print, and that was Poison Pen. Thank you, Jackie. Is, is that Jackie that I know from the handwriting group? We'll see.
She's muted, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's in the chat. No. Okay, another Jackie that spells it the same way. Okay, so I'd started writing in 1997, and I just had always wanted to write a mystery. And people kept saying, write what you know. And I knew handwriting analysis because I had been in the field for a very long time, since 1967. And actually in a full-time practice since 1989. But by 1997, as I like to say, I'd written all of these handwriting analyses, thousands and thousands of them, and I was ready to kill someone. So instead of getting arrested for it, I just did it on paper. And I started writing Poison Pen. And yeah, I had already published 2 nonfiction books, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Handwriting Analysis and Handwriting of the Famous and Infamous, and they were doing well. So I figured, oh, write a fiction book, because that's what I always wanted to do since I was a child of 8 and got my first mystery. And I figured it must be easy because, the first 2 books were easy to get published, got a nice advance and everything, but it didn't work out that way. And it took actually 10 years of really working on it. Yeah. Yeah. I started it and I kind of put it aside. And then I had a tragedy in my life, and my daughter was killed by her boyfriend in 2000. And he killed himself too. And I needed something to distract me, obviously. And so I pulled that manuscript up again and started working on it and finished it. A friend talked me into entering the first 20 pages into the Southwest Writers Competition. And so I did. And it won 3rd place out of 97 entries for mystery. So that was pretty good, And I went to Albuquerque where they were having the convention, and part of the prize was to have dinner with 2 big name editors, Sarah Ann Freed at Mysterious Press and Tom Colgan, who was at Berkeley Crime, and they were charming, had a wonderful dinner. And Sarah Ann Freed had critiqued the first 20 pages, and I always remember she wrote, I loved the characters. They were slightly over the top in a Jackie Collins sort of way, which was not my intention, but okay. So she said, send me the rest of the book. And Tom said, send the rest of the book. And I did. And I didn't hear anything back. And about 3 months went by, and I wrote to them and I asked, did you get the book? And Sarah Ann wrote back and said, I didn't like the characters.
Oh.
After what she'd said, that was kind of a surprise. But okay. She did, and sadly, right after that, she died. Nothing to do with me, I promise you. Um, Tom Colgan was wonderful, and he took the book to his committee, and he said they liked the story, but they said it wasn't strong enough. And I realized, what does that mean? Not strong enough? I don't understand. Nobody could explain it to me. And he and I kept getting this feedback when I sent it out to agents, and I didn't know what it meant. And then back in, it must have been about 2006, I had started a critique group through, I went to a Sisters in Crime conference, and I met some people there in my neighborhood, and we formed a critique group, and they were just wonderful. That was the core group, and it started out really big, and then we ended up with a core group with Gwen Freeman and Bruce Cook and Robert Fate, who wrote the wonderful Baby Shark series, and a new one is coming out pretty soon. So, um, we worked really hard on our books, and then a new startup company press called Capital Crime Press said that they would publish Poison Pen, and they did. And well, before they did, I worked with an editor, which is what I should have done before, but I didn't know that you did that. And she explained to me what not strong enough meant in the context of my book, anyway. And it's kind of like leave out the adverbs. You have too many adverbs that weaken the writing. Those ly words. That's the they say show don't tell, and when you use a lot of adverbs, you're telling. And the other thing was that Claudia Rose, she said, felt guilty all the time, and she said it's okay to have a character that grows. That's fine, but people don't want a weak. And there's that name again, that word again. People don't want a weak protagonist, a hero. So I fixed it up. It got published, and they sent it out for a review in Publishers Weekly, and it got a starred review, which I learned was a really big deal. And that brought it to the attention of an editor at Penguin, Kristen Weber, and she bought that book and the next three. So that was very cool.
Very nice.
Lots of things happened. She left when I was writing the fourth book. She left to get married. The nerve of her. And so another editor came in who didn't care about my series the way she did, and they didn't give me another contract. So I wrote a standalone book called What She Saw, about a young woman with amnesia, which is a theme that I've always been fascinated with. And there's another theme in there that I can't tell you about because you would give away too much. And much, there's a long, torturous path to publication, but cut all that out. I went to another small publisher, Suspense. They were wonderful. They published the next bunch of books. And now, early this year, I looked back at my sales last year and was not pleased. And I said, I've got to take more charge of my career. And as much as I love the people at Suspense, I told them I want my rights back. I want to create my own publishing imprint and be able to monitor sales and advertise and do those things. And so I got my rights back. I actually rewrote my whole series, both series, so that was 10 books, gave them all new covers, and released them over this last few months, culminating in 2 weeks ago when I released Dead Letters, which is the new one. So that brings you up to date with all
You took on an amazing amount of work, though, didn't you, to do all of that?
It was a tour de force. But luckily, I had met a young woman in a writer's group. She's in Wisconsin, and she manages her husband's books, and he now has 3 books. And she's done very well for him in advertising. So she has done all of the really hard work getting them published and all that. Well, I just had to write them, which was, it was really great because here I write a lot better now, I think, than I did when I started. And so that gave me the opportunity to, well, like in Poison Pen, I read it and I was embarrassed, even though it was good enough for Penguin to publish. But I read it and it felt like, oh, this is so overwritten and repetitious. I cut out 6,000 words. That's about 20 pages.
My goodness.
So hopefully it's better now. So we'll see.
But that's true of any author, isn't it, Sheila, that you develop experience and insight as to how you want your characters to be and the plot to move.
Yeah.
So I would think that's pretty natural for anyone.
But you don't always get a chance to do a rewrite.
No, but that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm really happy I got to do that. And I had finished Dead Letters last, almost a year ago. And Suspense, I had sent it to Suspense and they said, we'll bring it out next August. And I go, what? Next August? I thought you'd bring it out like in November. And they said, no, we're too busy and we're telling other authors 2022. So, but the funny thing was, after I took it back, it needed to actually wait and come out in August after all. So 2 weeks ago, I had a party, an outdoor party on a patio of a Mexican restaurant next to the beach, not too far from where I live. And we had about 90 people there. And
wow.
Everybody had a great time. It's funny though, because I was spending all my time signing books and just only seeing people just for a moment. I don't get to talk to anybody. I don't get to eat. I was providing them with Mexican food. I didn't get any. I did have cake. But everybody was having a great time, and so that's the important part. And
well, and that's a great turnout.
It really was. I had a stand-up, a cardboard stand-up of a mummy, and you could stick your face in it and get your picture taken. That was fun. And somebody brought Egyptian cookies. So, yeah.
Now I have to ask, what are Egyptian cookies like?
Well, she had two kinds, and one of them were little sesame crisps, and the others was, I don't know how to describe. It was like what do you call those? Those cookies, like a mound with white sugar.
Yes. Okay.
Like that, but it had a filling, a date filling. It was delicious. Yeah, and I had two big cakes with the cover of the book on them. One was vanilla cake with chocolate filling, and the other one was chocolate cake with raspberry filling. They were really good. So, yeah. So the book. Oh, and the other thing was, when I do launch parties, I like to make them a networking event, and so I tell anybody who is coming, if you want to bring a prize that's like $20 or more, a door prize, you can have 30 seconds or 60 seconds at the microphone to advertise yourself. And so we had like 30 prizes and everybody got something. And then I also had a gift for everybody who came. Here, I'll show it to you because I kept one for myself. It's the Eye of Horus.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Yeah, my sister painted them black on one side and gold on the other. She
lovely. Who made them?
I bought them on Amazon, but they were just plain wood. So my sister came over and brought some paints and sat here and painted.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's like a good luck charm.
Uh-huh.
And I think we can all use a little good luck these days.
Yes, totally agree.
Yeah. So the story. 2 years ago, I went to Germany for the birth of my one and only granddaughter, my only grandchild, who I'm going to show you. She is about to turn 2 next month. And she is, of course, the smartest, prettiest, cutest baby in the whole world.
Absolutely.
And so she was being born, and I went. My son and his wife live in Germany, and so I made the trip, and I really, really hate travel. I detest travel. I'm not like anybody else. Oh, here's a picture of, I think this is me in the, if you can see it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that was what we did. Um, yeah, so, but I couldn't miss the birth of my granddaughter. And so I went, and it was great. And I was there for 6 days. And then I'm from England, even though I don't sound like it because I've lived here since I was 14, 1960, the end of 1963. Um, so I can't find what I'm looking for. No big deal. Um, so whenever I go to overseas, I always go to England because I just have to, got to do that. Oh, can I interrupt myself to say, if anybody here buys the book from Book Carnival, I would be very happy to sign a book plate and mail it to you if you want a signed book.
Okay.
So,
Very nice. Thank you.
sure, I have book plates. And so I went to England, and I met up with some cousins there who I've became acquainted with on um, Ancestry, and they were wonderful. It's my grandfather's sister's grandson, and a bunch of other cousins, and so we had a really good time. And then I met up with some cousins on the other side, and we had a good time. And we went to Gibraltar, and that's where my great great grandmother was from. So I'm thinking, when I travel to Europe, I have to find a way to write this off. This is an expensive trip. So I have to write a book. I did that with my book, Outside the Lines, which half of it takes place in England,
Mhm.
and so that worked out really well. Well, I don't remember why Egypt came into it. I just really have always been completely fascinated with Egypt, ancient Egypt. And it may be because my cousins, who were the same age when I was about 6, they lived in Cairo. Their father worked for Shell Oil, and they brought home a fez, and it was just caught my interest. And I used to try to write hieroglyphics and stuff. So I decided to use Egypt. I've never been there. My son has performed there, and I know people who have lived there. And so I talked to all of them, and I went on YouTube and I looked at some people who had posted videos of touring around, well, around Cairo, but it's mostly in Luxor. So it gave me a real feel. The only thing I didn't get was the smell of the camels, and that was okay with me. So um, I, so I used all of that, and the story is, for some reason, Claudia's niece, Monica, who was introduced in book 2, Written in Blood, just in a small way, and she's continued through the series. She's the best friend of Annabelle, who is Claudia's young friend. They're the same age, and they get into trouble together. Well, Annabelle gets in a lot more trouble because Monica is a very sheltered girl. Her mother was killed in a drunk driving accident when she was 12, and so her father is very, very protective of her. But I've given her my desire to see Egypt. And so when she gets an opportunity to go on a dig, she's only 18, so usually you wouldn't get to do that unless you were a grad student. But she finds a way to be able to go on the dig. And she's thrilled, and she's having a wonderful time. And then Claudia's brother, Pete, Monica's father, goes off to Tucson for a college reunion where he promptly gets arrested for murder. And then we find that Monica is missing from the dig site. She's gone off on a weekend with a young archaeologist that she's met there, and they just don't come back. Well, Pete can't go after her because, you know, he's in jail. So Claudia decides that she has to go looking. And so the trail takes her to Egypt, where she has some adventures. And then she goes to Gibraltar and to the UK, where all kinds of things happen. So I hope that makes you want to read the book.
It sounds fascinating, and sites that I would love to have visited myself. Yes.
Yeah, Egypt. Yeah. Well, I've certainly been to England, and now I've been to Gibraltar, and that was great. Going up at the top of the rock and seeing the Barbary apes, and thinking about, you know, my great great grandmother having been there. It's kind of exciting. So, does anybody have any questions about or comments about any of that before we proceed?
Not seeing anything in the notes. You always write a fascinating book, and you have your characters doing very interesting things. I'm sure this is going to be the same way. I was reading just the little blurb about what Claudia Rose was getting into, and I can't wait until I get to finish it. So
Thank you. Well, you know, I noticed a couple of people wrote in the reviews, and by the way, it's in audiobook and digital and print. Here it is.
yes, there we go.
Yes. I love this cover.
And who does them, Sheila?
So who cover designer? Um, you know, I mentioned the young woman who's helping me with the publishing. Her mother is a graphic designer. And so I hired her to do all of the new covers, which I will show you. I think I have a slide with them before we get into, yes, I do. So, yeah, but I even though the book is only partly in Egypt, that had to be the cover.
Oh yeah.
But I sidetracked myself. I noticed that a couple of people have written reviews where they said, you know, I wanted to slap Claudia because she gets into these situations. But I'm thinking, well, if she didn't, there wouldn't be much of a story. So,
They can't have it both ways.
no. So if you would like to turn over the hosting to me, I'll share screen.
I will gladly do that. Let me get up here and find you. So I'm going into more and make host. And yes, and there we go.
Okay, thank you. Yes, there we go. Let me make sure now that I'm sharing the correct screen. You should be seeing the book cover and a big splash of color.
Yes.
And nothing else.
Right? We're seeing the attendees on the right. I am on the right hand side.
That's okay, but you don't see any, and I mean, as far as the book stuff, that's all you're seeing.
Correct.
Okay, and so you've seen that. So these are the new covers of all of the books. And I would love some feedback because some of them I like better than others. And I'm not sure about a couple of them.
I love the little girl in that one.
Yeah, that one's pretty close. Some of them are very close to the original. But what do you think?
The Inkslinger's Fall is also, isn't it?
It's a little different. Yeah, I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know what people think about Poison Pen. Anybody care to comment?
It doesn't tell me anything.
Okay.
What does anybody else think? Speak up. No.
Or forever hold your peace. Okay.
I like the written in blood.
Yeah. Somebody, you know, I posted that on my Facebook page to see what people think, and they kept saying that they thought it was a vampire book.
Only because she has black hair? I mean, come on.
I guess.
Hmm.
But the one that troubles me is Poison Pen, because in Poison Pen, the dead person dies in her hot tub, and
Ah,
there's no blood involved. And they've got here a pen with blood coming out of it.
yes.
So,
Hmm.
and then the other one I wondered about is Dead Right here, when Claudia
Um,
goes to New York.
well, the Broadway is nice. I don't know. Um, I hate to be the one saying all these things. Do you think it's a bit busy?
Okay.
I'm asking. What are your feelings about it?
Yeah, I felt, well, no, I just didn't like, I felt like the figure on it was too big.
Mm.
I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'm not totally comfortable with it. The Outside the Lines looks like an international thriller, so that's okay.
Right. And written off, I like.
Yeah, that's similar to the old one, and
Yes.
what she saw in Proof of Life are very similar to the old ones. So, all
But
right,
now, just in case, because of what you're going to show, those are a little bit cut off by the pictures that we can see.
they're cut
So I
off.
don't know if your program will be as well.
Cut off. Oh,
I, I don't know anybody else, but I only see half of Proof of Life and what she saw.
really?
I see the whole thing.
Do you? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, maybe just your screen. You might need to reduce the size of the image on your screen.
Right.
If you minimize it, then you can see the whole thing.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. So,
Feedback is good.
yes, always. So we're going to talk about this case that I became involved in and actually testified in. And somebody just today told me that they saw me on TV in this case, and it was weird because I was only on the stand for 10 minutes. So, but it was there was a TV camera pointed right at me, which is nerve-wracking when you're testifying, because it's my philosophy that when it's the opposing, the person who's cross-examining you, that attorney, it's their job to make me look stupid, and it's my job not to help.
Mm.
So the case that I testified in last week was great. I mean, it was an easy case because it was very clear to me that it was forged. There were 15 forged signatures, and this woman was transferring a bunch of properties from her husband into her own name or her son's name. But under cross-examination, this attorney asked the dumbest questions. Like she said, and were you present when Mr. So-and-so signed the documents? And that gave me a chance to say, he didn't sign them, which was just great. So here we go. Writers have created some really awful villains, you know, if you think about some of the ones like Hannibal Lecter and Darth Vader. By the way, if you see me looking in different places, it's because I have 3 screens, and so I have stuff open on each of them, so I have to look around. But so villains, Freddy Krueger, the Joker, you know, lots of villains. But with truth really literally being stranger than fiction, it's hard to beat some of the true life villains that we see in the news. And that's what we're going to talk about, one of them tonight. So once upon a time, an unlikely couple in their 20s got married. Their names were Jonathan and Linda Sohas. And the reason why they seemed unlikely is because she's 6'1", weighs 200 pounds, 28 years old. He's 5'6", weighs 120, and I don't know, he was somewhere in his 20s. So they may seem unlikely on the outside, but you know, true love doesn't care about physical differences. And they were happy together. And they lived in a beautiful home on Lorraine Road in San Marino, California. And you may know that, at least at that time, I don't know about now, this is in the 1980s, San Marino was considered the most expensive place to live in Southern California. And this was the house. The thing is, it wasn't their house, it was Jonathan's mother's house. and she was a woman named Dee Dee Sohus. And she didn't like Linda. She didn't think she was good enough for her baby, and I don't think Linda liked her either. For 2 years after they got married, John and Linda lived in his bedroom, his childhood bedroom. Can you imagine being newly married and having in those conditions? Clearly, they felt trapped and they wanted to move into a place of their own, which made sense. He worked in computers, and she was an artist, and she worked at a sci-fi fantasy bookstore in Sherman Oaks called Dangerous Visions. And so she worked in the bookstore, but she was an artist, and she liked to paint unicorns. Her artistic name was Cody, which will become important in a moment. She was just beginning to make a name for herself in the art world, and fantasy creatures. This is what she loved to paint, and she clearly had a talent for it. But Jodi Picoult, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Picoult,
Yes.
says people were just as capable of committing murder under the right circumstances as any monster. And sometimes people who commit murder under the right circumstances really are monstrous. Enter Christopher Chichester. Well, that's what he called himself anyway. His real name was Christian Karl Gerhardsreiter, and he was a young guy who came over from Germany as a student. He talked Dee Dee Sohus into letting him live in the guest house behind her house in 1985. I don't know why he lived there and not John and Linda, but that was the way it was. He got Dee Dee to buy him expensive clothes and, foot the bill. Linda told her friend Sue that she worked with that he was creepy and that she and Jonathan never spoke to him. Early in 1985, Linda told Sue that Jonathan had gotten a job with the government and that she was getting a great new job too, that they wanted to hire both of them, but they couldn't give a lot of details. They just wanted their people to know that the employer said they had to go to New York for an interview. So she visited her mother and her sister, and she told them they were going to New York for 2 weeks. And she took her beloved 6 cats and she put them in a kennel. And on February the 8th, 1985, that was the last of anyone ever saw of John and Linda Sohus. 8 weeks later, the kennel called, I guess they called her sister, and said that the cats were still there. Linda's sister contacted Jonathan's mother, but Dee Dee says, they're not missing. There's no problem here. They're on a secret mission. My secret source told me. And that was all she would say, which made it impossible for the police to investigate because there was no evidence of a crime. However, Linda, as an artist, carried her portfolio everywhere with her, yet it was left behind, along with everything else they owned. Dee Dee Sohus even told her friend that they had taken several of her credit cards and that charges were made on those cards in New York. Jonathan was very close to his father, who hadn't heard from him, and he wasn't returning his calls. He just couldn't contact him anymore. So time went on, and 3 months after the disappearance, after they left, Linda's friend Sue got a postcard from Linda. It was not from New York, but it was postmarked in Paris. And Linda's family also got a card, and it said, I'll show it to you in a moment, but they said, we never made it to New York, but, here we are. Still, there was no proof that a crime was committed, but there was one problem. Linda had no passport. So that was interesting. So the parents hired private investigators to no avail, and Dee Dee was heartbroken. She had a really big drinking problem. She let the house go to pot, and she eventually sold it and moved into a mobile home where she died 3 years later after writing Jonathan out of her will. Now, the next thing, the plot thickens. 3 months after John and Linda disappeared, Christopher Chichester, this guy, left town too. And guess what also disappeared? Jonathan's truck. Just gone. Then in 1988, the truck turned up 3,000 miles away in Greenwich when a man named Christopher Crow tried to sell it. Christopher Chichester, Christopher Crow, you know, a little kind of similar. The truck had an outstanding lien on it, and investigators discovered that Christopher Crow and Christopher Chichester were the same person. He also used Christopher Mountbatten and Chip Smith. Well, he did some fast talking and he disappeared before he could be questioned. I'm going to ask you to give me a second. My cat just came in and I need to shut the front door before she leaves again. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so he's vanished again, and the property in San Marino was sold, and in 1994, the new owners decided to put in a swimming pool. Well, guess what happened when they dug up the backyard? Yes, they found a partial skeleton. It was a small adult Caucasian male that had been wrapped in 3 plastic bags. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. And at that time, in the 80s, DNA was not in use. Plus, there was no jawbone or teeth for dental. And the DNA wouldn't help because there were no biological relatives because Jonathan was adopted. But in 2010, years later, the skeleton was positively identified as Jonathan Sohus. Well, the police started investigating, and neighbors remembered suddenly that they had seen strange color smoke coming from the guest house chimney. And when the police took luminol inside, they found a lot of blood. They talked to a friend of Chichester, and he said he had noticed a patch of disturbed ground near the house, near the guest house, but the explanation was, we had plumbing problems, so we had to dig up the backyard. So it sounded reasonable. He thought nothing of it. Investigators used ground-penetrating radar to try to find Linda. Linda Sohus has never been found, which is kind of strange. Now, what happens next? Using the name of Clark Rockefeller, Gerhardt's writer, Chichester, Crow, whatever, met a woman named Sandra Boss. He knew her twin sister from church, and she introduced them. Sandra was a millionaire, a high-powered business consultant from England, and she liked him, and he led her to believe that he was a member of the Rockefeller family. He invited her to go to a Clue party with him, Clue the game. She came as Miss Scarlet, and he was Professor Plum, wearing maroon corduroys. She thought he was very attractive. She said he was well-dressed, very fit, polite. He could talk about anything, and he was really very charming. So they got married in 1995. The honeymoon didn't last very long, and what had been occasional bouts of moodiness turned into huge temper tantrums over everything, including how much money Sandra made. And he wasn't working. She was supporting him. So he's yelling at her over how much money she made. And even the way she walked down the stairs, he was just criticized everything. But she thought it was the right thing to do to stay and work on the marriage, and so she stayed. and they had a child named Ray, R-E-I-G-H. There it is, Ray. He didn't show up for the birth, but he showed up to be a stay-at-home dad. He was completely devoted to her, and he referred to her as the love of his life. But eventually, Sandra got so sick of the behavior, and he's buying himself fancy cars on her dime and expensive clothing. And she talked to her father, and they had him checked out by a PI and discovered that he was a con artist. She filed for divorce, she got custody of Ray, and she was going to move back to England with her child. Well, Clark couldn't stand the thought of being separated from his little girl. And one day they were having a supervised visit. He was only allowed to see her with a social worker present. And they even had a PI following them, but he made a plan and he kidnapped her off a Boston street. He, I guess he followed them, and he jumped out of the vehicle, grabbed Ray, pushed the social worker down, and took off with Ray. And the PI couldn't get there fast enough to stop him. And you may remember this case. I think it's been like 10 years. So over the 6 days that he was in hiding before the police caught up with him, they did a background on him, and they discovered that Clark Christopher was a person of interest in the disappearance of John and Linda Sohus in San Marino, California. So eventually he was extradited and tried for murder, and his defense was Linda must have killed Jonathan and fled. But there was absolutely no evidence to suggest that, and there was plenty of evidence to implicate him. Okay, so a picture being 1,000 words. This is where I came into the story. You remember the postcards that Linda's friends and family received with a Paris postmark? Well, they had the media had several experts examine them, and they all said, no, it's not Linda's handwriting. And they what's the Pasadena? I think it's the Star Free Press, or it was called that then. Frank Girardo, who's a reporter for that paper, contacted me and asked for my opinion. And when I first looked at these postcards, I said, yeah, that's not her. But that wasn't all. In order to do a forensic examination, which to authenticate someone's handwriting, which is mostly what I do these days, there's something that you have to do. And by the way, the first 20 years of my practice was mainly in personality assessment from handwriting, but in the last 20 years, yeah, it's been going the other direction. So I mostly do handwriting authentication. And what you have to do, let me show you the postcards. And these are the 2 postcards. So take a little look at them. In order to authenticate somebody's handwriting, you have to know how many ways they write, because the principles axiom of handwriting examination is, first of all, no 2 individuals write exactly alike. Handwriting is like fingerprints. And the second one is no individual writes exactly the same way twice. Some people write remarkably similarly over a long period of time, and other people have numerous styles. So I need to see enough of their handwriting to determine what their personal range of variation is. So you had a moment to look at these 2, and you can probably see that they look like they're written by the same person. They're pretty consistent. They sign John, Linda, Linda, and John. And okay, but I said to the reporter, this is really not enough. Do you have, what do you have? And this is what I was first sent. Now, if you take, and this is what the other document examiners looked at too. And remember, her business name is Cody. So looking at that, do you think that looks like the postcard writing?
No.
Really, let's go back. Does that look like that? At a glance, it really doesn't. And then here on her invoice, she has different writing still. And then they sent me more. Here's some cartoons that she drew. There's differences there. And then we get to this card, this Halloween card. And that's different yet. And some more writing.
Mhm.
So I'm going to show you how I compared them. But here you might want to know, and nobody had this at the time. Frank Gerardo, years later, gave a talk at Sisters in Crime in LA, and he had been in correspondence with Clark Rockefeller. Yeah, I'm just calling him that because it's easier. And this is what his handwriting looks like. Okay, so what I did, when you have a lot of handwriting to look at, as in this case, I took the letters and the letter combinations that were the same in the questioned writing and the known writing. The question writing is the postcards, and I did a direct comparison. So here is the letter S, and you can see this is the question. This is how she writes. Her name is Cody, or she writes her handwriting. And it's not the standard S that you learn in school, but it's idiosyncratic. It's unusual. And the same kind of S appeared in the postcards. Same kind of W with this curved backstroke appears in both writings. The connection from the O to the U in the question writing appears the same in the questioned and the known writing both. Same thing here in the word, or whatever that word is, wood? I don't know what it was. And mother, we have similar forms of connections. The letter B was very similarly done. And this interesting G with a, and I'm sorry it came out so badly, but that's the best I got. We have this angle at the bottom of the G, and we see the same thing here. Then we look at her name on the one place where we had her name written out, Linda, and compare it to the postcards, and it's the same. Everything about it is the same. Look, even this little curve back on the last stroke here, and the angle here, which not on this one, but on this one. And then we look at syntax and punctuation. So in the postcards, the punctuation is dashes, which she uses in her known writing, and even the ampersand are the same. And in syntax, the use of the word kinda, not everybody does that. So it was in the questioned writing and the known writing. I think we already looked at that part. This shows the word any, which it's not a capital letter, but it rises up over the other letters and then it goes down at a slant. Same thing here in the known writing. And then finally we look at the numbers. The numbers are made. This number 9 is not your standard 9, so see compared there. And the number 3 with the big bottom. The number 8 is open. Now this is not entirely unusual to make an 8 like that, but in this universe of documents, it's important. And then we had the zip code with the 9, and then the next number gets smaller, which is done here. So, having looked at all of those things, what do you think my conclusion was? I said, she wrote it. It's very clear to me that she wrote the postcards. That was her handwriting. And then I found out afterwards that the sheriff's document examiner agreed with me, and so did her family and her friend Sue. So we all agreed. Then, so he was on trial, or he was going on trial, and I got a phone call. He was extradited from Boston. I got a phone call from Boston from his attorney, and he says, "We want you to testify in the case." And I said, "I don't want to testify. I think he did it." And he said, "That's okay. Just tell the truth about your opinion about the handwriting." And I said, "Well, okay, I can do that." And he paid me. And so I got on the stand, and like I said, I was on and off in 10 minutes. The district attorney says, "So, Ms. Lowe, you believe that Linda Sohus wrote these postcards?" "Yes." "Do you know the circumstances under which they were written?" "No," because I don't know. He could have been holding a gun to her head. I have no idea. And so he was thankfully convicted and got like 20 to life, I think, and is currently serving his time. He sat at the council table, never looked at me. He just kept his head down the whole time, and he still hasn't admitted what happened. So that was that. And let's see. Oh, those are my my other handwriting analysis books for anybody who's interested in learning about how to analyze handwriting. This one, I wrote the Complete Idiot's Guide to Handwriting Analysis, and 20 years later, they finally took it off the market. And I rewrote it and gave it a new name, Reading Between the Lines, which I like much better than the Idiot's Guide. And advanced studies is things like childhood sexual abuse seen in adult handwriting, and addictive personality, and serial killers, and things like that. And personality and anxiety disorders speaks for itself. And this is succeeding in businesses for people who are, in the field that want to do better. Improve Your Life with Graphotherapy is about how to use handwriting exercises to make changes that will improve your life. And what do we have? Oh, this is very quick, but I thought it was fun.
Very nice.
And I think that, no, go away. Is there anything else? No, that's it. Oh, the last thing I told you that about my daughter, that she was killed by her boyfriend, and people often ask me about it, and that's fine. And this is my daughter Jennifer and Tom Schnabel. He was a federal agent, and he killed himself too. And this was his handwriting. Because, when your mom is a handwriting analyst and you meet somebody new, what you do is bring home the handwriting. And he wanted to know what his handwriting said about him too. And I told him my concerns. I had a lot of concerns because the handwriting had red flags for potential explosive behavior. It couldn't say he's going to be a killer, but it did have some danger signs. But one thing that was important that I saw in it, which you probably can't see in here, but this, at the top of this B, it's dented, and then this F has a dark spot in it, and there's some other things. And part of now, no one thing in handwriting means anything outside the context of that handwriting. Meanings can change depending what else is around them in the writing. But this writing told me that he was an authoritarian personality, that he wanted to make rules for everybody else. It's do what I say and not as I do. And that wouldn't work for her. She was 27, he was 34. And they were together for less than a year when he killed her. It's tragic for that, but also he had a 9-year-old child at the time. He divorced, and interestingly enough, his child lived in Boston. So yeah, handwriting provides a lot of important information, but people who don't listen to it, it's not really helpful. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anybody?
That was amazing.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions I can answer, I'm happy to do that.
I have a question, if I may ask.
Yes,
How-
please.
What's the training involved to be able to give such a thorough analysis of handwriting? Because it just that little bit shows how, to me, how involved it is.
It's very complex. And are you talking about the personality aspects or the handwriting authentication?
Well, let's say both. That handwriting authentication was fascinating to me, the way you actually, as you say, you look at the letters and their indicators. And then the second thing would be personality analysis based on handwriting.
Yeah, well, both of them are based on the same principles, and it's kind of separated into three things. So you have experimental graphology, which is the measurable aspects of handwriting, the things that you can actually quantify. And then you take those things and you apply them either to personality assessment, which is about why the person writes the way they do, or to handwriting authentication, which is who wrote this. And there is no licensing in this field, unfortunately. There are private teachers like me. I have an online course, and I'm teaching a master course right now for people who have taken my course. And there are a few people around who teach it, but not very many. But the thing that let me just quickly say, there's two methods, two basic methods. And one of them is the atomistic step by step. It's like for left-brained people. You look at each individual stroke like you're looking through a microscope. You only see a little tiny bit, and you build that up into a picture. The other kind, which I use, is called the Gestalt. And it's like looking through a telescope where you see the whole picture. And they both have their merits. People who are more conceptual and creative prefer the Gestalt. But with the Gestalt, you're looking at space, form, and movement, just like in art. The way the writing is laid out on the page, space between the letters, words, and lines. You look at the letter designs, the way it's formed, the way it looks, and complex things like rhythm and speed and pressure and thousands of other things. So you have to learn all those principles, and then you can apply them.
And can I ask just one more question? Because they don't teach cursive in schools anymore. Well, some schools do, but a lot don't. And I have seen young adults handwriting that is in my opinion, not that I have a beautiful handwriting, but it doesn't look like an adult. Do you think that your profession is or how will it change, if at all, in this type of analysis, given that they don't, I mean, it's scrawling, it's chicken scratch.
Yes, that's true. And in 2009, the Common Core curriculum removed the requirement to teach cursive handwriting. And since then, schools and educators have seen the detriment, the detrimental effects on children. And it's starting to make a comeback. And as of last year, early last year before COVID, I did an informal survey of the states, and I found that 26 states, I think it was 25 or I think it's 26, now have some form of, they require cursive, usually starting in the 3rd grade, even if they don't follow it through. And in California, the requirement is just to teach legible handwriting. But current research, which is coming in really fast and furious, shows the effect of handwriting on the young brain. It's really, really important for them in spelling and learning and all kinds of, there's a difference when they hook them up to an EEG. There's a difference in where the brain lights up if they're writing in printing, in cursive, or if they're keyboarding. And with cursive writing, the brain lights up in more areas and in more complex ways. So 26 states have that requirement. 6 states, I think, 5 or 6 states have legislation pending. Something just passed the other day I saw, and I can't remember where it was. Only 10 states have no requirement at all. Some of them leave it up to the school district. But if anybody wants to get involved in helping the effort, I'm the president of the American Handwriting Analysis Foundation, and we have a committee called the Campaign for Cursive. And you can go to, they have a special website called cursiveiscool.com, and we have an annual cursive contest. And if you want to get involved and volunteer, you can go there. We would love to have you.
When you were talking about the comparisons of some of the letters, to me, some of them didn't look the same. And is that due to the instrument that they're using? Because one looked like it was a marker almost, or a much heavier pen or pencil.
Yeah, you have to take those things into account, and it's best when you can compare like to like. So, but it's never going to look exactly the same. It's the patterns that we have to look for, because everybody creates their own master pattern over time.
Mm-hmm. And then the analysis of handwriting, how did you develop that? And were you always right, or have you always been right, or do you know that?
In the feedback I get, we as a whole, handwriting analysts don't, and I'm talking about personality assessment, we don't claim to be 100% because human behavior is just too complex.
Mm-hmm.
But I guarantee at least 80% on all of the essential points, as long as I have a good sample of writing to work with. And it makes me think of a young woman. The analysis was gifted to this young woman by a friend of hers. And so he paid for me to analyze her handwriting, and I did the analysis, and she wrote back and she said, before I even finished reading the first paragraph, I was in tears because somebody finally understood me and knew me. And this is something that happens a lot. People, especially, I don't do a lot of in-person analyses or even like this, but when I do, I make people cry in a good way.
I don't know if I'd be brave enough to do it.
It probably wouldn't tell you anything you didn't know. Sometimes, I try to give a balanced report, and it depends on the purpose of the report. But it might bring out some things that were good that you didn't recognize, but it's not going to tell you anything that's, not you.
Well, but as you recognized in the young man that was with your daughter, you recognized that he had a dominating personality, right?
He's authoritarian. And the other thing that I failed to say, when I pointed out the dent in the top of the B and those other things, that indicated to me a head injury, because physiological artifacts show up in handwriting for all kinds. And I can't diagnose disease, obviously. I'm not a doctor, but it shows in parts of the body where things are going on. And I said to him, did you ever have a head injury? And he said, yes, I was hit in the head so hard I was almost blinded on the job. And he was having terrible headaches and going to the doctor for that. And when you combine a head injury with stress on the job, and they drank a lot, both of them did, then you have an explosion waiting to happen. And his blood alcohol that night was it was over 2.16, and they were down in you guys' neighborhood. They lived in Lake Forest, and they went to a bar called Cook's Corner that last night.
We know Cook's Corner well. Yeah.
She used to work there sometimes, taking money at the door. but that was in 2000.
This was fascinating. Does someone else want to join in on this
I
conversation?
just, I just want to say, I think the whole thing has been fascinating,
Good, good.
and I can't wait to read a book.
Thank you. And if you like it, and I hope you do, please leave a review.
I will.
Yeah.
I have a question. Did he inherit the money from the lady that he was living in the guest house?
Oh, I don't think so. No, because he was gone before she died.
So what would have been his motive for killing them? I'm wondering.
I have no idea. Maybe they were going to out him for being a cheat. I don't know. But I can tell you, I mean, and there's been movies made about this story, and you can find lots about it on Google. But some of the evidence that pointed to Clark Rockefeller was one of the plastic bags. I think that's what it was. One of the bags that he was wrapped in had the logo of a school in another state that this guy had attended, and all of the blood in the guest house. Just. I guess he says he is a con artist, but not a murderer. But what happened to Linda? She wouldn't just go. She was in love with her husband. Why would she kill him?
And of course, it wasn't pursued after that, I assume, to try to find anything.
Well, they tried to find her, but nothing. How did she get to France without a passport?
Mhm.
It's
Well,
like,
he had so many names. Maybe he had extra, phony ones, or could get her something. Who knows?
yeah,
And why would she, though?
why would she? She was doing well in her art, and she was having a happy life.
Hmm.
So we
It
don't
leaves
know.
us with all these questions.
It does. Yeah. It's it really is a fascinating story.
Well, you've made it fascinating and made it even more interesting with your presentation.
Thank you.
It's been lovely.
I'm happy I got to share with you.
Yes.
I think
Anybody else? Because I don't even know what time it is.
Would you recommend reading the Claudia Rose series in order?
you know what I tell people usually when they ask me that is read the last book first, and if you like it, go back and start at the beginning.
Okay.
You can, even though it's a series with the same characters, you can read them all as a standalone.
Okay.
Yeah. The first one introduces her, who, the man in her life, Joel Jovanich, which I wish that I hadn't given him such a hard name to pronounce because it doesn't look like it sounds. And then in the second one, you meet her niece, Monica, and Annabelle. They all have their stories. And then
They're all very enjoyable.
thank you. And let me just put a word in for the other series, the Beyond the Veil series. When I wrote What She Saw about this young woman who wakes up with amnesia, I had no idea that 6 years later, when I started writing, I wanted to write a book about the world of spirit because my daughter is very involved in my life from spirit. And several different mediums independently told me that she was going to be writing this book with me. And it was true. And as I started writing this book, I realized that the young woman in What She Saw needed to be the main character here. And then I realized that the young man who was in, at that time, the last Claudia Rose book, which is written off, needed to be in there too. So those characters come back. I love it when characters go book hopping and you see them again.
It's an interesting concept. I think someone who follows all the series would like that.
Yeah, it's like with Harry Bosch and what's his name, Mickey Haller.
Right.
Haller.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful, Sheila.
I'm gonna stop
Very
the recording.
enjoyable.
I'll stop the recording and then give you the hosting back.
Oh, okay.